So thanks for joining us, everybody. It looks like a lot of our registered guests have arrived, so I'm going to get started. I'm Kirsten Lyons. I'm Stewardship Director with Friends of the St. Clair River. I also have with me Lydia Nicholas, our Environmental Field Technician. And I think our Board President, Sherry Faust, is on the call too.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for hosting this, Kirsten and Lydia, and thanks to St. Clair County for partnering and collaborating and funding this program.
So you may have noticed that many of our academic and agency partners are using the term Lymantria dispar to refer to these little troublemaking caterpillars. And that's because the name gypsy moth is considered an ethnic slur. No one has come up with an agreeable substitute for the common name, so for now, we're introducing folks to the scientific name. Tonight, we're going to share a brief overview and local updates on this invasive insect, and then we're going to take your questions and comments at the end. So as you can see, this is not a new problem. Lymantria dispar was introduced into the northeastern US in 1868, and it spread across the region quickly. We didn't find it in Michigan until the 1950s, and then we began to see widespread and severe impacts in the 1980s. Our last outbreak in St. Clair County was right around Y2K, and we hoped we were done when the population crashed due to some very effective caterpillar killing pathogens that we'll talk about later. That little yellow arrow is where I joined the suppression program and received my training in the late 1990s, just as the collapse was occurring. St. Clair County had a cooperative program until the early 2000s, but by then we were only spraying a few hundred acres per year instead of thousands. And as you are all well aware, the experience and training that some of us locals have is coming in handy once again with this latest cycle of outbreak. Friends of the St. Clair River is partnering with St. Clair County to provide fieldwork and public education on this topic. So just a quick rundown of the life cycle. The caterpillars hatch from egg masses in late April to early May. They don't all hatch at once everywhere, so the caterpillar feeding season can actually last for more than a couple of months. And then the caterpillars spend a couple of weeks forming cocoons and pupating. They emerge as adult moths in July and August. They mate, lay eggs, and die by early September. The egg masses last all the way from late summer until through the winter and then till the following spring. And then they hatch as tiny caterpillars and begin the cycle all over again. The egg masses are what we are looking for now. Egg masses can tell us a lot about the overall trends and health of the population and help us gauge how severe our challenges might be in spring, summer of 2022. In just a few minutes, Lydia will tell you more about where and how we look for egg masses. Egg masses can be laid on any outdoor objects, including tree trunks, house siding, RVs, firewood, and more. Moving an outdoor article with egg masses or other life stages attached to it from one location to another is often how Lymantria dispar is spread. Estimating ratio of old to new egg masses is an important indicator of outbreak trends. Since egg masses are adapted to life outdoors for 8 to 9 months in harsh conditions, we often find old egg masses that would have hatched the previous spring while we're out there. We have several ways we can tell if the egg masses are new or old. Old egg masses are often bleached and falling apart. They're spongy and they give easily when they are lightly pressed. New egg masses are firm to the touch and typically brighter and darker in color. We have to be careful though, because egg masses laid on the undersides of branches high up in a tree can appear to be new because they aren't as exposed to the elements. We need to find at least some egg masses down low so that we can estimate the ratios of new versus old, measure their sizes, and determine the densities. The POP test is a definitive test for determining old versus new egg masses, and it's kind of fun.
What you doing there, Lydia? So I am putting a little pinch of this egg mass on the back of this hard surface. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press my nail into it and see if it pops to tell if it's old or new. If it's new, there will be a good popping sound, the eggs popping. That was an old
It's
one.
an old one, I'm reading.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay.
All right. Is that, where did that was this one here.
Okay, so that's old, and we think maybe the one top right is new.
Yeah.
right? So let's put a pinch of that.
Big pinch.
Yeah, that crackling is the sound of the eggs breaking.
Yeah,
Under the pressure.
and that juice.
The juicy. And there's a little, yeah. That's fine. So those eggs will not be hatching in the spring.
When the caterpillars hatch out of egg masses in late spring, they'll often hang out on the egg masses for a few days until the trees leaf out and the weather warms up. Once they start to move off of the egg mass, they'll begin climbing up in the canopy to feed. So you can see in the lowest picture, the little tiny caterpillars hanging out on the egg mass. Caterpillars can move around by ballooning, where they drop down on a silk thread to catch the wind currents and blow to another tree or your head or your coffee cup. Caterpillars go through subphases called instars, where the growing caterpillar molts, its skin splitting at its head capsule, and then it walks out as a newer, bigger, brighter caterpillar. Male caterpillars go through 5 instars, and females who need the extra energy to lay eggs, they'll go through 6 instars. Each caterpillar can eat a square yard of foliage over the course of its life, and the foliage can be from many different species. The only life stage that feeds on anything is the caterpillar. Eggs, pupa, and adult moths of Lymantria dispar do not feed on anything. Lymantria dispar caterpillars form a cocoon around themselves and pupate after their last caterpillar instar. They spend a week or 2 in this phase undergoing metamorphosis. Then they emerge as adult moths. The adult moth phase of the life cycle lasts less than 2 weeks. The only job of the moth is to mate and lay eggs. Males can fly, females cannot. The female is often called a walking egg mass for this reason. We do have some natural enemies on our team. There are a couple of pathogens that are very effective at controlling caterpillars under certain conditions. You might have seen large numbers of caterpillars dead or dying on the sides of trees or outdoor items. There were 2 natural pathogens that were released decades ago that have been catching up with Lymantria dispar populations in the last 30 years or so. The viral pathogen NPV, or nucleopolyhedrosis virus, affects large, crowded, stressed caterpillar populations. So if your outbreak was really intense, this pathogen may have kicked in and reduced caterpillar numbers. You know, it was after all that defoliation though, but still. It's also possible to have the fungal pathogen active on a population, and that doesn't depend on a large number of caterpillars. The fungal pathogen is called Entomophaga myomyga, and it can affect any size population. And the victims will be head down and shriveled looking. I often say that they look like deep fried thermometers. So the fungal pathogen depends on whether it only develops in cool, wet conditions, but it doesn't depend on a large population of gypsy moth caterpillars. We've been seeing evidence of both pathogens in many of the places we've been surveying egg masses. There are other animal natural enemies of gypsy moth. And one of those is this parasitoid wasp. It's Uincertus cuvani. She lays her eggs on gypsy moth eggs. Her eggs hatch inside the gypsy moth egg as larvae. They devour the contents of the gypsy moth egg. They pupate, and then they emerge as adults. This parasitoid wasp can take out up to 30% of an egg mass. This can happen over 3 generations in the fall and another one in the spring. So this is one of the reasons that we ask homeowners to wait to scrape egg masses until after January 1st, so that this wasp can have a chance to complete her life cycle. Wasp activity on an egg mass is a sure sign that the egg mass is new. It's not as much fun as the pop test, but it's still pretty interesting to watch. There's a couple of other native caterpillars that can cause gypsy moth traumatized homeowners some grief. The eastern tent caterpillar feeds at about the same time as Lymantria dispar, but it forms webbing in the crooks of tree branches. Lymantria dispar doesn't form any webbing. Fall webworms feed in the fall on the inside of webbing at the tips of branches. Both the eastern tent caterpillar and the fall webworm are native species and they're part of our natural ecosystems. Controls rarely necessary. And if they're really bothering you, you can open up the webbing if you can reach it, and that way birds can have at the contents. And now I'm going to turn this over to Lydia, and they will talk with you about our fieldwork and what residents have been reporting to us.
All right, so to start here, I have this aerial photo that was taken last November, right around this time in Columbus. And here in the red circle, you can see the property owner's house. And in the description here, all of the oaks are the only deciduous trees left with leaves. And so they're the brownish color that's kind of stands out. You can see that clear line along the back of his property. And we're going to compare that with this next photo. You can go ahead and change the slide. In which the oaks are the only trees without leaves. This was taken this summer on the 4th of July at the same area. And you can see the house there. And so if you trace that same line, you will see that all of those trees that had leaves are now bare and distinctly stand out amongst the rest of the fully foliated trees. And that was all due to gypsy moth predation and their defoliation as caterpillars. Next. Here we have some more impact photos of the defoliation of different people around the county have seen. So up in the little left, we can see that the taller deciduous trees are clearly defoliated, whereas the conifers below seem to still have some greenery. That was out in Smiths Creek. We also have these photos from St. Clair Township and Casco. All of these areas seem to be hit pretty hard by gypsy moth this year. This outbreak did kind of come out of the blue for most people. So to see the trees so bare in the middle of summer was very surprising. A lot of people said that it felt like it was the middle of winter because they never get that much sun there in the middle of summer. Next. Here we have some more impact photos of the caterpillars, which were absolutely a big nuisance. And there a lot of the complaints is from the caterpillars making their life outside miserable, unenjoyable during the prime summer months. So you can see that they are absolutely all over the garage in the upper left-hand corner. All of those little black lines are Lymantria dispar caterpillars. And so between the caterpillars and their frass and the leaf debris that they create, it just makes people's yards, patios, pools, and the like unusable during the prime summer months. And so we operate under the belief that this is a quality of life issue. Next. And finally, here we have, these photos are all from the same property. So on the left, you can see the tire treads are just full of frass, which is caterpillar droppings, and leaf litter. And both of those things create very slippery surfaces on decks, which makes it a bit of a safety hazard as well. And this year, because of how bad of the outbreak was, in this middle photo, you can see that this conifer tree was completely defoliated. It ate all of its needles, and this won't be coming back next year because of that. Conifers really struggle to put out a new set of needles, unlike deciduous trees that can push out a new set of leaves, like we see in this final photo, where they are starting to releaf after the gypsy moth, the Lymantria dispar, had completely defoliated those trees. Next. So there are a lot of different ways that we are collecting our reports to which properties we go to. The main being the St. Clair County Caterpillar Survey, which is on the St. Clair County website. And the issue with that was it wasn't created until August. And so that was after the prime time that people were severely affected by this outbreak. And so also we have been collecting our reports from MSU Extension, from Macomb and St. Clair, the Lake St. Clair SISMA, which stands for the Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area, which is between Macomb County and St. Clair County, as well as MISIN, which is the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network. People were able to report sightings of Lymantria dispar there. And so we are collecting those, as well as people who had talked to municipal and county leaders, talked to their township advisors, and so a lot of townships had different lists of people who had reported their gypsy moth problem. And so we are collecting these reports from a lot of different places so we can make sure that everyone is getting access to this information as well. And we are heavily relying on neighbor referrals as we are doing surveys. So if you have an issue and you reported, but your neighbor didn't, it's important that you reach out to that neighbor and encourage them to report if they had an issue as well, so that we can get this cooperative between neighborhoods. Next. So we have reports from all over the county. Here we have a density map of the reports we have gotten. And as you can see, Clyde Township was hit really hard. We have a total of over 600 reports right now, and they are still coming in. Clyde Township makes up for a quarter of those reports. And so around Clyde also did get hit pretty hard. So far, we have completed a good amount of surveys in Fort Gratiot, Birchville, Kimball, Wales, Goodalls, St. Clair, and Columbus. We have been collecting all this background data from these communities that had a pretty good impact, ramping up to going and surveying in Clyde. And we are also going to be completing the surveys in the western part of the county here this week. As we continue our surveys, more reports are coming in. And so we are going back to these communities as well, or we will be going back to these communities as well as needed as these reports come in. Next. Now, the county GIS has been mapping our reports for us. And so on the left, you have the map of the reports that we have gathered from Clyde so far. And we do have more reports to be added in, but this is just a base of what we have so far. And so all of these are reports that we have, and you can see that they seem to follow the Black River. And so that's our highest density area that we have had in St. Clair County. And we will be completing our surveys there soon. On the right, we have Columbus Township, which is an area we have completed a good amount of surveys in. And so the different colored dots represent where we have reports, where we have completed surveys, and if those completed surveys would qualify if the county were to organize a spray program versus if they would not. We do not have a certain yes or no answer if there will be a spray program yet, but we, based on what we have been finding in the county, we are going to propose that one should be organized. Next. Right now, we have 2 different crews working in both sides of the county. So I work on the northern half of the county, and Kristen leads a crew on the southern half of the county. And together we are going out and going to all 600 of these properties that have reported to check for egg masses in their trees on their property. And so you have an example of our data sheet, and this is what we fill out as we go out to properties. A copy of this is left with the homeowner, and if they're there, we do like to explain exactly what we did for them. And so they can go out and see exactly what we saw. Oftentimes, homeowners will come with us if they are able, which is a great help too, because they know where the issue was. And so homeowners are really our greatest allies in this process. So we are always looking for volunteers to come out and help us with egg mass surveys. So if you have any time you would like to volunteer, there's no training necessary. We will train as we go. And we are just collecting the data right now to support the next steps. This will be going all throughout November and likely December too. So anytime you would like to offer, you are more than welcome to join one of our crews. Next. So there's a few different things that you can do to help besides volunteering with us. Reporting online is definitely the biggest step. We won't know if there's an issue there if it's not reported. And so also talking to your neighbors and getting them to report too, so that we can have that cooperative area between them. We are asking all homeowners to wait until after January 1st to scrape any egg masses. I know that you want to get rid of them as soon as possible, but we can't count egg masses that aren't there when we do our surveys. So if you haven't been surveyed yet, any egg masses you scrape will not be counted, as well as that parasitoid wasp that Kirsten talked about. Her life cycle is going on right now. And so we want to give her as much time as possible to complete that life cycle. And finally, if another county were to audit one of our spray blocks, we need those egg masses to be there so that they can recreate that data sheet. And finally, just keep in touch with us. You can sign up for our newsletter, as well as keep an eye on your email for our updates on the Gypsy Moth program in St. Clair County. Next. And finally, you can visit us online at the Friends of St. Clair River website. There's a lot of different programs we have going on that you can get involved in, not just the Gypsy Moth program. And we'd love for you to volunteer with us or get involved in our organization in some way.
Thanks, Lydia. I think what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna stop the recording and then we'll welcome everybody to turn on their microphones or type into the chat if you have questions or comments or want to discuss something.